Yo, greetings, family. Greetings, and welcome. Yeah, just apologies. Yeah, for the late start. You don't know. You know what I'm saying. But we are here and we are ready to go. Myself, Shakara, alongside Chief Fode over there in Sierra Leone. This is the inaugural episode of Forward March. Yeah, and periodically we're gonna keep you in tune with Wagwan in the African world from a myriad of different perspectives, and these things, yeah. So bigging up Chief for there. How you doing, King?
No doubt. Man, I'm good, Shakara, man. I'm blessed out here, man. Feeling good out in Sierra Leone today, man. It's a beautiful day, actually. And
Yes, sir.
man, it's a great day. It's a great day to kick off Fort March. For
Yes,
those who
sir.
don't know out there, Fort March is being brought to you by the Black Star Action Network International. This is a platform for all kinds of Pan-African discussions. It's a safe, sovereign space for us to be ourselves online and be able to get some information that we wouldn't get no other way. So today we have a very, 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 you know, I would say much needed conversation coming to us from a brother who's competent, who's credible, and who has been putting a lot of work in, Brother Putu. Um,
Mhm.
this discussion will be around, the question of Garveyism in Liberia historically and today, as his brother is
Mm.
involved in a movement to resurrect Garveyism in Liberia. He's been doing it for years, him and his comrades. Shout out to my brother King Jaws out there. And, just talking about that as well as the current state of the country, some of the pros and cons that people out there should be aware about, as well
Mhm.
as, emphasis on the current Centennial, year of return events that's going on in Liberia. So,
Mhm.
we feel as though before we try to understand Liberia from the outside, we will invite our own brother who's on the inside to come here and provide us with more clarity and more informed positions from people that are really, really, really Liberian and really, really, really being infected and impacted by everything that's happening concerning that territory within Africa. So yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we're going to bring our brother through shortly. Just want to welcome brothers and sisters who are in the chat. Yeah, bigging up Baba Sengo Jawara Baye, who's tuned in. And yes, Baba, everything is okay. We're here. We had a bit of a late start. You know what I'm saying? We know how it is, kings and queens. Sometimes when it comes to, the motherland, things like electricity, you know what I'm saying, can can be intermittent. This is how it goes, you know what I'm saying? It's one of the challenges, but we're here and we're overcoming those challenges right about now. And bigging up to Ignacio Morenos as well. Yeah, locked into the chat. Let us know where you're locked in from, family. We look forward to hearing from you. And we're gonna keep it moving right about now. So as Chief Fode has said, we're gonna be speaking to brother Putu, who's representing Liberia. And we're going to be talking about the year of return and the history of Liberia, kings and queens. So we're going to bring forward our brother right about now, activist, artist, Garveyite, you know what I'm saying, an all-round general, kings and queens. We introduce you to brother Putu. Greetings, my brother. How you doing?
Peace, 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 and blessings, man. Brother Shaka
Yeah,
Rod, brother.
man.
Good day, how you
Music
doing? It's a
ambassador.
blessing.
That's right.
Yes, indeed, indeed. It's a blessing to be here. Puruga talk for Phenom, live and direct. You know what I mean? All praises to the Most High. Yeah, I'm thankful to be here on the first edition of the Forward March, man. I'm so humble to be here with
Yes,
y'all.
sir. Yes, sir.
Shout out to
Yes,
everybody in the chat. Can't
yes,
see
sir.
everybody, but I heard Baba Sango's name. Shout out to Baba Sango
Yes,
and
sir.
all the comrades over the year. I know Brother Sam's watching, but yeah, we on it.
All right, now this is going to be a powerful conversation, kings and queens. Yeah, we've got a brother in Sierra Leone and a brother representing Liberia, and these two places on the continent are very significant. Yeah, when we're talking about the history of Pan Africanism and the African liberation movement in general. Yeah. And so there's a lot of beautiful history, there's a lot of controversial history as well, and especially when we're dealing with Garveyism and Liberia. it can get controversial. So we're going to be discussing those things, but all in the context of what's happening today and what we need to be doing today. So we're going to start. Let's start with the history, Chief. How that sound? We're going to get into the history.
Yeah, let's get into the history, man. Let's talk about it. It's an open discussion. So the first thing we want to get into right now, man, is let's just talk about the history of Pan-Africanism in Liberia. But before we get, the first thing I want to really do is allow for Brother Putu to one, you know, give us a segue into that discussion, because it's only appropriate. Even while you're out there in the diaspora, you know, we brought you here to be the spokesman for Liberia, and that's very, very important for us. So I think that instead of me opening the discussion, you got the floor, brother.
All right. Okay. Peace. Yes, indeed. So just to get into it, we're gonna just get into it. I'm actually not in Liberia right now, but we have my brother George Ever Living King, who I'm gonna be referring to during this conversation. I can give a little bit of my background as well. But when it comes to Pan-Africanism, before it was known as Pan-Africanism, the spirit was alive. You know, the desire of, you know, those who were and Africans who were enslaved in the diaspora to, you know, reconnect with their ancestral homeland, with their homeland in Africa. And we can't talk Pan-Africanism really, you know, without it, you know, acknowledging, you know, Sierra Leone or Freetown, you know, some of the earlier settlements, you know, in the late 1700s, Granville, you have like Thomas Peter, you have, you know, that whole movement of Africans who were in Europe and you know, who were in Europe, Britain, you know, and British Canada, seeking to go back to Africa and actually going back. And yeah, there were some settlements that came out of that, as I mentioned, Freetown. But what ends up happening, what makes Liberia unique is that Liberia, the case of Liberia, was the first of those settlements, you know, that was able to emerge from a colonial to a cluster of colonies to a commonwealth and actually become a nation state. So it was the first to, you know, that, you know, to kind of, you know, morph into that as a nation state. And then not only that, it was able to survive the Berlin Conference, because Liberia gained had its independence in 1847. You know, about 40 years or so before the Berlin Conference. You know, so and still facing, you know, assaults on its encroachment on its territory and sovereignty. So it survived the Berlin Conference, and then also it survived, you know, the World War I, the end of World War I, the League of Nations, which, you know, there was another new world order that was established at the end of World War I, and again, its sovereignty was challenged, but Liberia survived. It survived through the 20s, and of course, we're going to talk about how Garvey and the UNIA tried to intervene in the 1920s, you know, and take hold of Liberia, and then Liberia, you know, survived that, and then it survived the emergence of the UN at the end of World War II, which was also another situation that changed the whole global order. You know, some nations rose, other nations fell. And then Liberia, you know, lasted through the Cold War era, you know, it lasted through the Civil War and also the Ebola crisis. And then now, most especially going on with the whole Corona situation, the COVID-19, and how that has and is changing the global order once again. And we see what's happening globally now with Russia, Ukraine, and other parts of the world. There's a new shift going on right now. And again, Liberia is very, very crucial in that. And in this episode, I hope to kind of share with our Pan-African brothers around the world what is happening to Liberia in this process right now. Because again, what's key about Liberia is that Negro clause, that clause that has been embedded in Liberia's constitution since its inception, that make it so that you can only become a citizen and in turn own land if you are quote unquote Negro or of Negro descent, African or of African descent. Sierra Leone has a similar clause, but I believe that you can be naturalized, maybe before they can, elaborate on that. But when it comes to Liberia, it's the only nation yet still that we as Pan-Africans have that we can kind of build some kind of base and then, strengthen it to Sierra Leone and move so on and so forth. So I'm gonna explain a little bit more about that. So Pan-Africanism in a nutshell, that's just the beginning. I'm not hearing Brother Fode. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that, brother. I appreciate that, man. You pretty much wrapped it all up, man. Liberia is Pan-Africanism. You cannot talk about Liberia without talking about Pan-Africanism. I'm a student of the history of the region. So one of the things that I always do is go back to the pre-colonial, pre-European contact of the indigenous peoples there, the Days, the Golas, the people that was there for thousands of years already building civilization. And before any European ever reached the shores of West Africa. So I understand the contradictions inherent in, Africans being brought back from the diaspora by European powers that were intent to colonize Africa. And then, the Africans coming back being caught in that kind of crossfire. And the reason why I speak about that is because my own belief is that Pan-Africanism is born out of our resistance to oppression. And not only just general oppression, but the oppression that only Black men, women, and children experience in this world. And so it's a special kind of oppression that Pan-Africanism emerged out of. And I believe that the resistance movements of our ancestors on the continent, from capture all the way to the coast, all the way across the Atlantic, and on the plantations all the way up till now, have been one continuous flow of revolutionary Pan-Africanism. But in terms of the early ideological makeup of Pan-Africanism, I believe that Liberia plays a very integral role that no genuine Pan-Africanist can ever look over for several roles. You talked briefly about the colonization and things like that. And people have different opinions on the aftermath of the first contact, but the reality is that Africans found allies when we returned, and not only in Liberia, but also we found allies here in Sierra Leone as well. People who themselves were fighting to suppress the slave trade that was impacting their kingdoms, and they were against it. They wanted it to be over. So they was open to the Africans coming back who had been victims of what they were standing against. So we always talk about Black abolitionism, but we never include the Africans on this side who opened the doors and allowed for Africans to resettle, knowing how they left, understanding that these are our brothers and sisters, that they're a little different now, but they're us. And so, that whole spirit right there is vibrant in this region. I mean, even if you read the general history of these countries, you take the African diaspora out of it at all, on two ways. Many of us came from this region. Many of our ancestors originated in this region. And then many returned. And I'm not just talking about African Americans. You had people coming from the Caribbeans like the father of Pan-Africanism, Edward Blyden. And he lived in Liberia and he lived in Freetown. His great granddaughter is a politician here now. And so you have these legacies and these peoples and these bloodlines and that's really here, that's really been contributing for centuries to whatever development we can claim. And so that's a very powerful thing. Liberia has been to Africa, I believe, for the African diaspora, what Haiti had been for the African diaspora in the Caribbean. Being the first republic is very controversial looking back, but we never know why or what all the circumstances was in the decision making. What I do know is that the history of Pan-Africanism is a tendency of fighting against anti-Pan-African tendencies, especially within our community. There had always been Africans who understood that we had to stand independent and sovereign and fight against empire and those who stand for empire. And I believe that you can tell Liberia history without it being a glorious history of fighting against empire. Even when you talk about civil wars in this region, you're talking about the influence and the intervention of empires. You understand? It's like we're talking about everyone fascinated with Ukraine and Russia right now, not understanding how the United States is fighting a proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. And so when you understand that there was proxy wars being fought in Sierra Leone and Liberia, and them people were being financed, they were being armed, they were being informed, they were being assisted, UN, everything, to keep the war going at times where these wars could have ended peacefully very early on. You know, it became convenient and very, very profitable to keep the Liberia-Sierra Leone war going. And I believe that this is the resurrection. As Brother Putu says, it's RBG reloaded. You know, the last thing I want to say is about the Negro Clause. In 1847, when Liberia formed this republic, they definitely that they were up against white supremacy, or they would have never put a Negro Clause in their constitution. And for Sierra Leone, it was only after independence in 1961. At first, for the first year or two, anybody could have been a citizen, but then they was inspired by what Liberia did to keep out non-Africans, and then they put a Negro Clause as well. Here it was more to combat the the siege war through Lebanese half caste or mulattoes or British mulattoes to stop them from being able to use their half caste to seize the power. And so now it's a little bit more liberal, a little more open. But back then, that's why Sierra Leone did it. So just to show you how Pan-Africanism has always been going back and forth in this general Sierra Leone, Liberia region, and we see it as twin countries. These borders are fake. These are the same people in the same struggle. So that's what I would add to the conversation.
Let me ask you, brother Puto, you can answer this as well as Chief Fuddy if you have an insight, because we spoke about the fact that there's a Pan-African energy that informs the founding of Liberia, and then Chief Fuddy also mentioned that there's a contradiction within that in the sense of the U.S. involvement, in that process as well. And when you spoke about what's it, Pan-Africanism before it was called Pan-Africanism, Puto, one of the leading lights of that is a man by the name of Martin Delaney, and so there's a lot of Pan-African energy developing in Liberia, but there's also a lot of Pan-African critique, in that era, in that 1800s era, and Baba Martin Delaney is among the most vociferous, in terms of the critique, of Liberia, and I believe he was writing like the 1850s, if I'm not mistaken, the paper that I'm thinking of. But considering the relationship between the Liberian government, not necessarily all of the people now, but the Liberian government and their relationship with the American government within the context of actually being independent. So I'm looking for a reflection from you, Chief. Puto and Chief Fode, if you have something to add to it.
Okay.
In relation to those dynamics.
Okay.
I'm talking about the discussions that were happening between Pan-Africanists or African nationalists at that time in terms of what was taking place in Liberia and that development, the positive versus the contradictions that were within it as well. How do we contextualize those things today for our people today? So
Yeah,
you're on
yeah.
mute.
I think that's good.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Poochie. You
that's
take it ahead first.
yeah, that's a very very great question and something that a conversation that we should be having more in these times. And the reason why it's important is because this is important because this conversation about Sierra Leone and Liberia, and talking about how these conversations were happening about almost 200 years ago. There are lessons for us to learn about right now in the modern Pan-African repatriate movement, Ghana, Senegal, the Gambia, because some of the mistakes and some of the things that we are just jumping into, in this modern wave, when we revisit some of those conversations that people like Martin Delany, and not only Martin Delany, but also Frederick Douglass, who was a critique of Liberia. We can understand and see what was going on. So prior to the beginning of the U.S. Civil War, the conversation about Liberia, or just in general, what to do with the it was like a lot of them were mulattoes, the children of raped, from their slave masters. There was just a lot to do with what to do with that class of Africans, and not only African formerly enslaved people, but also what to do with people and free African Americans who were inspiring slave rebellions and slave revolts. Around this time, you had Nat Turner, you have Denmark VC, you have all of these, and also the Haitian Revolution played a very, very big role. So the conversation in America at that time was like, okay, what are we going to do about this situation? So you had leaders like Martin Delany and Frederick Douglass, and not only that, you had Harriet Tubman. And it must be mentioned that a lot of Harriet Tubman's family members migrated to Liberia, to the Maryland side, and also Sierra Leone. So what they were saying, and a lot of their critiques was, as you said, was like, there should not be a Pan-African movement that is headed by or controlled by the imperialists, by the colonials. That was mostly the critique, because a lot of when you look at the the American Colonization Society, and the people, which is the entity that really spearheaded the Liberian project, that was where a lot of the critique came from. It was more so along the lines of like, what is the intent of this Liberian project? People now, if we as African Americans, I'm speaking like from the arguments that Martin Delany and Frederick Douglass were making at that time, we fought, or we are Americans. Some of them were first, second, third generation Americans. All they knew was America, and they felt they could, they should fight for their freedom in America, and that the idea of repatriating African Americans was a guise that that American elites at that time was a strategy that they were using to make them not be make the African to not be able to assert their freedoms in America. Okay, so that's where the argument and the critique was coming from, that it's not in the best interest for us to to focus over there when we can make grounds over here. This is a strategy that they're using. But at the same time, what we also must recognize, though, is within that wave of within those like the American Colonization Society, who acted, a lot of them they were agents who took the African American settlers to the coast of what became Liberia, right? That spirit, these individuals, they genuinely and sincerely saw an opportunity to start new, to start fresh. And in fact, when they recognized what, like the strategy, what was going on, because you got to remember, Liberia became independent nation in 1847. All right, and that's about 20 plus years since the colony. So what were they getting independent from, and why were they doing? The reality was that there was a commonwealth, a colony and commonwealth system that was emerging over there, where there were white governors in Africa. White governors. These were headed by white people, and so the African Americans who were there, who were in these early settlements and colonies, they observed and said that we didn't come over here to Africa to endure the same thing that we've been, enduring in America. So there became that fight to kind of detach from that hierarchy and that power structure, But at the same time, you had, the natives and indigenous, as Chief Fode expressed there, who some of them, yes, true, there was a great number who did embrace that, but at the same time, you also know how the enemy has done divide and conquer, right? They really did their best to create a situation where the rifts between those who repatriated from the Americas and those who were natives, who were the indigenous, the colonists played on that. The colonial energy played on that, and then when we see and read about the narrative about Liberia around that time, it is often told through the lens of white supremacy. So it starts off with this divide. The Americo-Liberians or the American Africans went over there and they did the same thing that was happening over here in America into Liberia. So that's how the story of Liberia has been told to the world, which is not. This is not true. That's not the whole story, of what it is. And what that does, it causes a perpetual, or it has caused a rift that has lasted generations, because the reflection of African American, of that stigma of African Americans going to Africa and having a certain having certain behavior that is negative towards the natives over there, that reverberated around the rest of the continent. You know what I mean? In the perception of how the continental Africans perceive African Americans. And to this day, we still see the rifts between the so-called African Americans and the continental Africans. Yeah. So now what we're doing in this modern time, people like myself and Fode and Joseph Olivia King and others, what we're doing is we're jumping in the mix to kind of bring a better perspective and a more accurate narrative. We're not here to say that there wasn't some rifts and there wasn't some misunderstandings in there. We're not here to say that, because anybody can go through history and there were some rifts and there's some misunderstandings between the native Africans and those that repatriated.
Yes, sir.
But they were very much exacerbated and amplified intentionally by the imperialists, both the American and the Europeans, the British and the French, which I'll get into a little bit more. So I don't know if they wanted to jump in a little bit on that, but very great conversation.
That was a beautiful
Yeah, man. Yeah, Brother Puchu, man, I think you pretty much dropped the mic. There's a few areas that just your brief discussion brought up in my head. And one is that you're absolutely right. A lot of those who were free or freed in America were mulatto. They were mulatto caste, and it was in a time and a place, an era, if you will, of history, whereas the mulatto had a caste relationship above the the African. And so when you understand, it's almost like America was in trouble. They was in deep trouble. Yeah, it was deep trouble because you had, by 1822, you had the Gullah Wars jumping off in Florida. The whole United States Army was tied down fighting runaway Geechees and Creek Indians. And then you also had In 1831, later on, you had situations like Nat Turner. You also have Denmark Vesey. You have all these different. It was a general period, and when you look at when they say antebellum United States, they're talking about a period from 1810 to 1861 when the Civil War began. If you look at that period, that was the same period in which the illegal slave trade continued, in which within the United States, you had slave breeding, you had westward expansion. So you had all these things that Europeans wanted to do in America, and they had this troublesome potential group of Africans that would inspire the enslaved toward freedom. And when you go back and read about these Africans, like, there's one that I always like to highlight, a brother named James Fortin. James Fortin was a pioneer in many black organizations, but he ended up being very wealthy, working on the docks. But he was a black man who I believe he was captured by the British during the American War, or he was with the British and then got captured by the Americans or something like that. But he ended up coming back and being very, very, very wealthy, very influential. James Fortin, you'll find him back in the days with Prince Hall. You'll find him with Solomon Jones. You'll find him with Richard Allen. That generation of free black who didn't identify as free blacks. They said they were free Africans. In fact, the first society was a free African society in Philadelphia, and that's where the African Methodist Episcopal Church came from. There are people in the 1700s, early 1800s, in the United States who are not chattel slaves, identifying themselves as free Africans. And so that's another point to look at. A mulatto may not have viewed themselves as a free African. And so there was a distinction and a definite difference. But at the same time, America is an imperialist nation from inception. But black people have played a physical, pivotal role in even America becoming a nation state itself. And when you go back and understand why do they call it an American Revolution, what made that fight against Britain a revolution? It wasn't just because they fought and won. It was the reason why they fought and what they obtained as a consequence of victory in terms of white people within the system of white power. They were fighting their hierarchies. They were fighting their kings and queens and their noblemen. That's what they were fighting. They were using religion as a political context. They had politicized religion to the point that every religious denomination was like a political party, a little society for itself. And so America provided fertile ground for them to just run amok with their own religious fanatics. At the end of the day, what I do see in terms of how people like Martin Delany may have seen Liberia coming back, and even how Edward Blyting described the situation on the ground, was that there was a serious anti-imperialist consciousness and resistance, and they were fighting it along legal lines within the system that was imposed on them. Almost like we fight for civil rights in America. It's not our country, but we have to follow those laws and fight within that confines. You'll see early on that our people was fighting against imperialism. It wasn't just for them. They were fighting against the United States controlling the situation, the United States government controlling the situation. And even when you go and you see the 1847 Constitution of Liberia, it is not a mirror of the American Constitution. There were Africans who created that Constitution. And I believe that one of the writers of it was from Virginia. I can't recall his name right now, but these were people who had some memory among them. They had some memory among them that
Hillary Teague. Hillary Teague.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they had some memory. They had some memory and some exposure to the revolutionary ideals of freedom, liberty, aka Liberia. So the black people, the Africans involved, had already been impacted by these sensational ideals, and were seeking to have them for themselves as well. Coming back to Africa was like if you're in Africa, you can build your own society, and you'll find that many Africans wanted that. They wanted that. You know, our ancestors wanted to come home. We want to come home, and we want to have our freedom again, have our sovereignty again. And even in Freetown, when the British brought back the brothers and sisters from Nova Scotia in 1792, they immediately began what I call the first anti-imperialist, anti-Western protest movement. Because first they tried to appeal utilizing the system, and then they resorted to armed rebellion by 1800. And so there was a process that happened from 1792 to 1800 in Freetown, Sierra Leone, that was distinctively, one, Pan-African, and two, anti-imperialist. Pan-African because the ultimate violent rebellion that took place almost overthrew the Sierra Leone Company's administration of the Freetown colony. And it wasn't a battle that was fought only by those who came back, but they fought it in alliance with the Koya Timnis, the people who actually accepted them back. So this was an indigenous African and quote unquote African American rebellion against the British Sierra Leone Company between 1792 and 1800. So yeah, absolutely. Our people was here fighting. They was trying to understand it, trying to figure it out, and ultimately trying to secure as much freedom as possible. I think that the cultural, the ethnic differences in Africa, people fight ethnicity here. I think that the ethnic differences between those who came back, it disturbed the process of us being able to peacefully fight the enemy. So that's what
to contextualize this little more, yeah, I do want to say, even in highlighting Martin Delaney, and that kind and his critiques, he wasn't just critiquing from the sidelines, because this is a man who traveled to Mama Africa and was trying to formulate similar processes. So him and Robert Campbell, who's an African from Jamaica, actually signed an agreement, yeah, with a group of chiefs among the Eba people, among the Yoruba people, in what is now called Nigeria. So I'm highlighting that to say that these men weren't just critiquing, yeah. This is a condition in which Africans are trying to find out different ways of achieving certain things, yeah. And so these brothers and sisters are active, whether they're in Liberia, whether they're in Sierra Leone, whether they're in other parts of the continent, yeah. And many times Africans who traveled back never just stayed one place. We've mentioned Martin Delaney, we've mentioned Edward Wilmot Blyden, we've mentioned others. And oftentimes, if you check their history, they traveled around, yeah. They lived in different places, and so they informed themselves, yeah, and formed linkages and relationships with Africans in different parts of West Africa in this instance, yeah. But I think for the sake of time, because we could spend the whole show talking about the 1800s, right? And the development of Liberia. But I know we're all Garveyites, and there's many Garveyites listening, and they're gonna want to know, you know, before we bring it right up to date, let's talk about the history of Garveyism in Liberia. We know that there's a lot of hope embedded in Liberia at one point. And then there's a lot of dismay, yeah, and disarray after 1924. And in fact, within that context, because there is an analysis that suggests that Liberia is in fact was subjected as the first neo-colony, in the sense of the fact that American corporations were installed in order. And this is one thing that people tend not to talk about when they talk about the fractures between so-called Americo-Liberians and the indigenes, so-called. They tend to leave out the presence of American corporations, yeah, like Firestone,
yeah,
who you know installed themselves into Liberia in the 90s. In fact, but are we not coming up towards the end of their 99-year lease of the land?
Oh yeah,
is that not the case? And they're trying
oh
to
yeah, it's coming.
I hear that they're trying to, you know, they might try to, you know, extend the lease right now. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. But
yeah, they're gonna double it up.
Right, you know what I'm saying? And we know that it's a very controversial history. So let's talk about that, brothers. How do we contextualize universal African nationalism, Garveyism, within the context of Liberia? You know?
Also, real quick.
Yeah.
Also, while you do that, also segue us into the RBG Reloaded movement, and then maybe we
Yeah,
can take a quick break and show some of that video.
some of that video as well. Oh, you know what? Before we go into that as well, I do want to highlight to add to the history that Chief Foley was laying out, because he spoke about you know, the US government extending west and that kind of thing. And part of that was to do with Haiti as well, yeah, and the Louisiana Purchase, you know, because you know what I'm saying, our ancestors in Haiti made it very expensive for the French to continue the enslavement process, so they had to sell land cheaply, yeah. Bearing in mind that what is now known as Louisiana was owned by the French at that time. We also have to address the issue of the uprisings in Jamaica as well. Sam Sharp in the 1830s in Brazil, yeah, with the Baha'i, you know what I'm saying, uprising. So I'm putting it in this international context that the pan-European world, yeah, was trying to figure out how to deal with this problem of rebelling Africans, yeah. And even though many of them had wars between each other, they understood the need, like all of them, for Haiti, for example. The French wanted Haiti, the British wanted Haiti, and the Spanish wanted Haiti. But and they fought against each other to get Haiti. But in the end, they realized they had to unite amongst themselves in order to squash that rebellion, in order to squash that revolution. So I'm putting that in the international context. But yeah, we're gonna get to Garveyism in Liberia. Oh, the chat. I don't want to get the brothers and sisters in the chat. Sorry, brother Putter. I know you're coming. Just give you a sec to just acknowledge brothers and sisters in the chat. Yeah. We got to Sam P. Collins, Leinu, I believe that is Lee. I think that's how you pronounce it. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Big up yourself. Coffee Campbell's in the building. And we will be opening up for you to make contributions and ask questions to Kings and Queens. All right, so do stay tuned. All right. Go ahead, brother Putu. Sorry, bro. You're on mute. One second.
Oh, yeah, man. This is a very, very interesting conversation. And you see, when we start going in, there's so many layers and layers and layers. And we want people to know that we in the time span, we don't have enough time to touch on everything. So some people might say, what about this? I mean, we didn't even highlight Paul Cuffey, and have people like Elijah Johnson and Hillary Teague, and those, like, these are people around that time who played very much significant roles and everything like that. And as Shakara just explained, the Louisiana Purchase was very significant, and it was like the whole Midwest. It was not just Louisiana. It was a whole big chunk of what is now the United States that the French owned, that that the U.S. was able to acquire, largely because the Haitian Revolution, the Haitians were going at it and defeated the Napoleon Army. Now, the War of 1812 as well is also what we have to talk about too, and the battle that went on in New Orleans, because that could have shifted whether that land went to the British or to America, So that a reason why I have to acknowledge that is because we have recurring names. You have America, you have Britain, and you have the French. Okay, the way how this relates to the region that we're talking about is because Liberia, which has the American connection, all right, to the left of Liberia is Sierra Leone, which has the British connection. Okay, on top of Liberia is Guinea, and on the right is Ivory Coast, which is the French. So you have the French on this side, and you have the British on one side, and you have America, Liberia. Okay, so Liberia, what is modern day Liberia? What the territory was actually larger than what it is today, and it was because of the encroachment by the French and the British, who was always trying to, encroach in actually questioning Liberia's sovereignty prior to the time that it became actually became a nation state. That was one of the reasons why Liberia had to assert its sovereignty, because the British and the French, they were doing their trade and they were doing their commerce and everything, and they were encroaching, and they were asking America, like, who is these people? Like, what's going on over here? You know what I mean? Because the flag of Liberia is similar to that of like the America. So, you know, there's always been that German, I mean, oh yeah, the German too, but a British, French and American, like that Liberia has always been you know, in that conversation. Now, the reason why 1822 to the 1824 period is significant, which we're going to get to the bicentennial, right? Okay, 1822 is actually when the settlement of Morovia, which was called, they called it Christopolis, the city of Christ, between that period from 1822, and then it was changed to Monrovia in 1824. And that is very much significant because it was in late 1823, December 1823, when James Monroe issued the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine at that time was pretty much America's way of asserting herself. When James Monroe said that all the turf that is the Americas, that's for America, that's South America and South America, you know, that he was issuing that statement to the European powers at that time to say no more coming over here to set up colonies and everything like that. America is going to quote unquote handle that. And as you guys were talking about, that's at the same time all of this rebellions and independence movements were going on. So at that time, when that Monroe Doctrine was issued, which dealt with the foreign policy on the Western Hemisphere, Liberia was already in the mix there. And by the time Liberia or Monrovia, you know, because Christopolis turned into Monrovia, it signaled a message, okay, you know, to the French and to the British that, okay, this is ours right here on the African side, So that was like the Monroe Doctrine. We often talk about the Western Hemisphere, but that move of changing the name of the capital, what became the capital of Liberia in 1824 to Monrovia, was a significant statement because at this time, the Europeans were doing their explorations in Africa, okay? And throughout the 1800s, we got to also acknowledge that this was around the emergence of the Industrial Revolution, okay? There's significant gains in technology, all right? And the resources that were needed to stimulate this Industrial Revolution, all the precious metals and raw minerals, by that time in Europe, a lot of it was depleted, but they recognized through their exploration that Africa had an abundance of all of these precious metals, the iron, the steel, the coal, and all of these things that actually built up the infrastructure of America and Europe and everything like that. And that what led to the scramble for Africa in the 1880s. The scramble for Africa, because the word got out among the European powers, like, all right, we've been fighting all these wars amongst ourselves, you know, but we're going to have to go to Africa. Let's, you know, I know y'all want a peace. You want a peace. Okay, let's have this Berlin conference where we're going to say, okay, Britain, this is yours. Belgium, this is yours. French, this is yours. So that's the way that they started taking over Africa with their colonies. And Liberia was still there in the mix. So the time between the 1880s, okay, leading up to the First World War in 1912, during that 30-year period, there was a lot of extraction. All the European powers were getting all their raw minerals and their resources and building up their armies, building up their infrastructures to the point that it got to the point where Germany, okay, where when we learn about World War I, we often just look at it from the lens of what was going on in Europe, but it was basically a war that was fought because based on the resources that they were getting out of Africa at that time and building up their armies and their capabilities, so that's what really World War I was about. And then World War II, again, extracting the resources, the different European powers extracting resources, and one nation becoming more powerful than the other. And it was actually Liberia played a pivotal role in assisting America's interest in those wars, both World War I and World War II. It was during World War II that Liberia actually got its airport, which was a base, started off as a military air base. Okay,
yes, sir.
So you're right when we look at Liberia and the reputation that Liberia has in the greater Pan-African community. A lot of times Liberia gets a bad reputation. We only talk about it from what happened, but we don't talk about the conglomerate of all the foreign powers that were, all jumping in on Liberia, to which Garvey, who recognized what was going on in World War One, okay, after World War One, he said, you know what, we need to go and start a nation or assist Liberia, where there's a potential for us to build a Pan-African nation powerhouse. Okay, so when Garvey was making the inroads in Liberia, and we must acknowledge that there was serious inroads in communication between the UNIA government and the Liberian government, to the point where there was delegates going back and forth. You had the mayor of Monrovia, Gabriel Johnson, who was actually voted as the high potentate of the UNIA in 1920 during the convention. So there was a very strong influence of the UNIA within the Liberian government, the whole political structure. And when the European powers like Britain and France at that time recognized that it was actually them who kind of put pressure on America, to do something about Garvey and say, look, this Garvey and this movement can't, get its base in Liberia because it's going to affect Sierra Leone, Guinea, Ivory Coast. So that's how they ganged up, to trumped up charges against Marcus Garvey and disrupt. And then we know the story of W.E.B. Du Bois, who served as an agent to actually connect Harvey Firestone, to the land that was appropriated for Garvey and the UNIA. So that whole rubber plantation there, that was supposed to be something that was supposed to be in the hands of the Pan-African movement at that time. And why that is significant is because the rubber at that time, with the war and with the emergence of the cars and the tires, that the British were pretty much had a monopoly on the rubber industry at that time. And America saw an opportunity now through Harvey Firestone to go and set up the largest plantation for rubber, in the 100-year lease. And that whole process right there helped to get America out of the Great Depression and do a host of infrastructure projects in America between.
That deal revolutionized the automobile industry, yeah. Because it was literally Ford, yeah, who was able to basically mass produce his cars based upon rubber, yeah, and his tires, based upon the rubber that was being brought from Liberia. All right, so the automobile industry got a significant boost because of that particular deal, and we're talking about 1 million acres. Just to be clear, 1 million acres that was sold at a price of 6 cents, I believe, per acre. Yeah, pittance. Yeah, ridiculous money. To the Firestone Rubber Company. And when we talk about what happened again between Africans in Liberia, very few people talk about the serfdom, yeah, and the more or less slavery conditions that were imposed, yeah, upon African people on these rubber plantations in Liberia as a result of that deal. And there's so much I can say on this. I'm going to respond to this, and then I can see Chief Foley wants to say something, so I'm going to pass over. But the Coffee Campbell in the chat says Firestone didn't install themselves. The King government invited them, which is false. This is not a particularly true claim. We're not. First of all, we're not paying attention to the relationship between the Firestone Rubber Company and the American government. Yeah, the American government was known to use its corporations. Yeah, or its corporations were arms of the government itself. Yeah, the same would go for the United Fruit Company in the Caribbean. So when Firestone traveled to Liberia, he traveled with representatives of the American government. Yeah. And as Putu has outlined, the American government had relationships with the French government and the British government, who were trying to encroach, yeah, and threatening to invade Liberia, and would have done so if it had not been for the assurances and America bringing its force to bear in Liberia through corporations such as the Firestone Rubber Company, which Britain and France were also able to receive benefits from. Yeah. So it's not a matter of King just inviting Firestone himself. That's a false claim. Go ahead, Chief. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I just on the Firestone issue alone, it's very clear that the West has always been seeking to exploit Africa's resources, particularly um, like Putu highlighted during the period of industrialization. That just changed everything up about how white people was going about their own hustle, and we got caught up in the middle of that diplomacy. But at the same time, I wanted to back up a little bit concerning Garveyism in Liberia. First of all, I just want to say that Garveyism is, to me, universal African nationalism. It's predicated on race nationalism as well as African nationalism. It's both combined. It is race first. It is not anything else, but it is definitely for Africa and African people all around the world to control our own resources. So the whole Garveyite movement is about self-help and addressing the issue of dependency on our oppressors. And so I believe that Marcus Garvey and the UNIA, they recognized their political assignment. They understood what they had to do in order to attempt to stop an imperialist, agenda. And like Putu was saying, the French, the British, the Americans, these are all imperialist nations, especially as it relates to Africa and this region right here. Going back to the issue of encroachment, Liberia, people don't really know, but in 1847, what caused Liberia to announce itself as a republic, and not even to its current territorial size? That came later in the area that Putu's talking about. Because if you look to Ivory Coast and Guinea, you see French. If you look north, you see British. And in Liberia, America Constitution wouldn't allow it to legally colonize Liberia. So what they did was the British ships was coming up and down, but they refused to pay taxes to the Liberians. They refused to pay taxes. They refused to pay taxes. And America couldn't say, well, that's our colony. You got to pay taxes to America through Liberia. So this is where the whole conversation came about freeing this black population and allowing them to have their own black republic. And then from there, things went. Later on, when you get to understand that, okay, after that, the British recognized Liberia before the United States. Other countries recognized Liberia before the United States. So we always hear this thing like Liberia was created by American imperialism. And in some instances, you can say that, but in others, you can say that politically. The nation of Liberia, this modern day republic, it was literally, established in an anti-imperialist way if you take it into the black man's interest within that whole scenario. Our interest had always been the same. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's very important to point out. Another point of Garveyism is that not just with the UNIA ACL movement, because of course we know that many other expressions of Garveyism grew off of that movement. Many other expressions. And when you have a country with the history of Liberia, particularly when you talk about Garveyism, because we're not talking about Garvey or the UNIA seeking to come to Senegal. We're not talking about Garvey and the UNIA seeking to go to Ivoria. We're not talking about that. We're talking about them going to the only independent republic that existed on the continent of Africa, that black people from the diaspora collectively, not only from America, also many, many, many from the Caribbeans, and I'm sure many from Central and South America as well as Europe. were able to see that this was a place where we could center ourselves as a race and pursue African nationalism from that base. And so I say that because a lot of people think that Garvey was actually trying to conquer Liberia, or it was an imperialist agenda for the African diaspora to return. But you have to understand why we were returning and what we were returning to do. We were returning to offset this imperialist struggle, to reunite African people around the world for the purpose of Africa for Africans would have meant that we slapped all imperialist hands off our resources. Garveyism is revolutionary in essence. And I believe that if there was no Liberian unity with that, if there was no Garveyite consciousness in Liberia, then we wouldn't be able to talk about this history. Brother Putu, real quick, man, I wanna go into RBG Reloaded. You've done a lot of work over the years. Liberia Hills, you know, you're a very dope Garveyite MC. A lot of people, I believe they need to hear your lyrics, man. They really need to see what it is that you're representing. So we're going to segue into, you know, a clip, your video. But before that, can you just like segue us into that? Tell us what RBG Reloaded is, Liberia Hills, you know, what's going on.
You can.
Sorry,
Okay.
bro. Start again. Start again.
Good. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And man, great account of, like, you know, the case for Liberia to help people better understand. And just about RBG Reloaded. Basically, the whole concept behind that is understanding that because of the reputation and the history that a lot of people have been turned off by Liberia, but it's largely because they have not taken the time to really look at all the different things that we are sharing right now. And like you so rightfully pointed out, there was a very particular and intentional reason that the Garvey and you and I, you know, looked at Liberia and did what they were doing in Liberia. And the question is, okay, does that potential still there exist? You know what I mean? And so RBG Reload, as you can see, this is one of my signature habits that I do when I'm performing. I'm going around. I have the Liberian flag, you know, but I also have it with the red, black, and green flag, right? Because when you look at the Liberian flag by itself, it speaks of, you know, reflections of American imperialism and everything like that. You know what I mean? And Liberians love this flag. We are like people who love this flag because, you know, to a certain degree, there's a lot more to it than just, you know, what you see in the colors, right? But by connecting it to the RBG, you know, that's the way that we connect back to the essence of what Pan-Africans, the red, black, and green, because this flag here is what really inspired a lot of, or was like the influence for a lot of the other African nation flags as they began to get their independence in the 1950s and 60s. So by connecting it together, I'm reminding people about what was happening or what Garvey and them was doing. You know, so RBG Reloaded is the way of the comeback, the resurgence of that RBG spirit in this generation, in this time, you know, in Liberia specifically, and also to let the Pan-African world know that there's still that consciousness there, and that which I think we need to get into this next piece right here, that it exists. And there's some key information that the modern day Pan-African family needs to know, and how they can aid and help make that happen in this time 100 years later. So the song RBG Reloaded, I looked at the popularity of all the different music out there, because I do hip hop, reggae, Afro pop, Afro beat. And I say, you know what? I'm gonna do a track on a hip hop beat, on a down south, you know, type beat that's pretty much been dominating the sound, the airways for the last, you know, 15, 20 years, you know, and I'm gonna put some Garvey rhetoric, some RBG, some red, black, and green rhetoric, and that also makes references to Liberia at the same time, and do a video with this in there. So that's the whole concept of RBG Reloaded. And not only that, it was done in the 100-year anniversary of the convention, where the red, black, and green flag was established and made in 1920, August 1920. So this came about in 2020. I wrote the lyrics, I recorded it on Garvey's birthday. You know what I mean? So and put the video together. But with the whole corona and all the things that are going on, it hasn't really kicked off the way it needs to. But with interviews like this and more press, we're gonna push it get some fire behind it, and it's a way to communicate with the younger generation in a very quick way, in an effective way. I'm in the clubs and you see people dancing. You got these girls twerking, the RBG Reloaded. Then they ask questions. They're like, "What is RBG? What is RB? What is that?" Then I get them. Then I get them like that. So it's a strategy. You know, take the history, put in the work, read it, go through the experiences. Not everybody has the patience and the time or whatever to go in there. So we're gonna find a creative way to get the message out there and break it down to them and let them know that why they should be a part of the movement. Liberia Hughes is the reconciling arm of what we're doing. You know, especially in the post-war era. Liberia Hughes. Okay, the Liberia Hughes initiative was I'm one of the vision bearers, along with Jaws Ever Living King and also the late Vicky Ward, God rest her soul. We established that in 2012. This is the 10-year anniversary. And seeing and looking all across the Liberian diaspora and back home in Liberia locally, we saw that one thing that we could unite Liberian people around is, unfortunately, you know, but the trauma that we as the Liberian people have gone through, particularly in the last 30, 40 years, from the coup to the war, the political instability in the 90s, 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, then even the Ebola crisis. So Liberia Hughes is the emblem or the movement that came out of how we're going to unite the Liberian people. Because not everybody, like all the Liberian people, know all of this history, and they can't even relate to it. Because, you know, most Liberians in the last 20, 30 years have been in a state of survival and just trying to achieve stability financially and peace of mind. Although only some of us have been able to, you know, really dig into the history and everything like. So Liberia Hughes is the way how we bring the Liberian people together and also maintain peace in this time when the imperial forces are still trying to cause a disruption, which is very important. Okay, this connection is very important. Now we are looking at what's going on in the Ukraine, okay, and Russia and NATO and all of those things. But this is very, very important. Liberia has the only mining operations for ArcelorMittal, which is the world's largest steel producer. Okay, and ArcelorMittal was the first foreign company to do an investment in the post-war era. It signed a deal in 2005 for 25 years, and it was supposed to be for 25 years up until 2030. And within the last year, there's been some controversy about an amendment to extend that for another 25 years. Okay, and not only that, there's other quote-unquote competitors, and like Solway, which is another company, and other companies who they say is sponsored or the Russia is behind it. So in this modern time right now, steel is very important, and not only that, uranium, which Liberia is very rich in. Okay, so there's a huge conversation going on right now about that. The United States government is involved with it. The EU is also involved in it. And I'm saying this is currently modern day. So what we're seeing that going on in Russia and Ukraine right now, literally, there was deals and things going on just a week, 2 weeks ago during the bicentennial, where everybody was focused on the entertainment and all the history. But all this other thing is behind the surface. And this conversation here is to alert all the Pan-Africans that around the world as to what is going on. because there's a new world order emerging. There's going to be a change of currency, leaving the fiat and the dollar and going into the crypto world. But if you control a very important commodity like steel, no matter what the new currency is, you're going to become rich. So what's going on in Ukraine, all right, is there's a uranium and also steel mining operations there as well. And the leaders of the old world order are trying to assert their ground and say, okay, this is mine, this is mine. So when the change comes, they can sell off that resources in the new currency where it is. So the message now is, with the help and assistance of the Pan-African world, if this message and this understanding, which I can give you more research, more references, and we can get a conversation with the Liberian government, about what's going on, to where those resources can be more so beneficial to Liberia, and also a Pan-African, Pan-African. We can support Pan-African efforts. Okay, if we pay attention and we have access and control that, because what they're giving Liberia, what these companies are giving Liberia in return, I mean, it's crumbs.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
But if we control, we can actually become like a superpower, from Liberia, and then achieve what Garvey and the UNIA were trying to do 100 years ago in this time, in this generation.
I love the way the whole situation up to date. Yeah. And you're right. By the way, brothers and sisters, we will be discussing the Ukraine, NATO, Russia situation more next week. Yeah, we're going to be bringing a powerful brother by the name of Kwame Pianki, and we're going to be going into that more.
Yeah, man.
But there are so many like perspectives and angles to this current war situation that the mainstream media is not going to focus on. And brother Putu, you've just contextualized even further, for us. And even this idea of we're going into this new digital world, but they wanna take Africa through a digital revolution before we've been through an industrial revolution, whilst they maintain control of the minerals for industrialization, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And the minerals for even digitization, because contrary to popular belief, the digital universe still requires material resources to make it happen. Right? It still requires, uranium and coltan and all of these things, right?
Yeah.
So I love the way that you've just contextualized it in terms of the Garveyite focus and what we need to be focusing on right now in relation to Liberia. And so one of our questions today is, what is the condition, the state of Garveyism? We've got our good brother, Mr. Untouchable, who says, no, not this one, sorry. He's first of all, he's commending you, brother Putu, for putting the message in the music. And then he says, we got to move from the Monroe Doctrine and start establishing a Garvey doctrine in Liberia. Yeah, I'm gonna say a Messiah doctrine. I like Messiah doctrine. I like that, rings well with me. Messiah doctrine. Yeah. What's it called? In Liberia. And so you've given us some insight into how we develop a Messiah doctrine, the kinds of issues that we need to be focusing on. But there's a lot of people believe, though, my brother, that these ideas are absent. They're not present on the African continent. People on the continent don't care about these things in an African, universal African nationalist or Pan-Africanist sense. So what is the current state of Garveyism or universal African nationalism in Liberia? To what extent is Garveyite organizing taking place?
You hear me? And I thank you so much for that question in there. And Brother Fode, I don't know if you still have that picture that I sent you, if there's a way to put over there, but if you can't, that's okay. But over the last 15 years, this movement, that's where we're coming with what we've been doing over the last 15 years. As I mentioned earlier, a brother, Jaws of a Living King, he's actually been in Liberia since 2010. Okay. That's actually, my biological brother. We had a certain awakening, triggered largely in part with the Hurricane Katrina situation, where it allowed us to kind of reflect more at our roots, because our family migrated to the States in the 80s, and we grew up in the States, and were able to understand and see certain things, but we grew to understand Liberia a lot more. And with the question became, why is Liberia not really told or explained to Black America the way it needs to be? And so you're right. The consciousness of Garvey is there. The remnants is there. There's actually the delegations that went to the Liberia in the 20s. There were people who actually moved there. People like the James Stewart moved there, and other people from that time. So, but it wasn't really reflective all the way in the government, in the policies of the government. A lot of Liberians may mention people like one of the presidents called named President William R. Tolbert, which that there needs to be a story, a segment just on that and what happened with him, because his administration was overthrown in 1980. But he in the 70s, he was kind of embracing a certain Pan-African do for self-reliance policy that caused some problems internationally, into why he was removed from his power. That needs to be talked about. But this movement that we've been able to nurture over the last 15 years is comprised of getting the information that we're sharing here with the common day, everyday people of Liberia. So there's a lot of Liberians now, a lot of young people through our movement over the last 15 years. It started in the diaspora, but George went back in 2010, and I've been over there, spent extensive time over there, but also coming back to keep the link going between the diaspora and the grassroots over there, where we have so many different young people and people of all walks of life, where we take the videos and documentaries, we have conversations in the hot spots in different areas. We took a figure like Dr. Umar Johnson to Liberia back in 2012, to help and reiterate the message. That's a conversation for another time, maybe, but the whole idea of Garveyism and what that means, we've been putting the message out there on a grassroots level, and people may not see that, because when you go to the media outlets that are reflective of Liberia, they're not going to talk about that. A lot of the rhetoric is negative. Even right now, the situation's going on with the airport, and they're saying that there's a lot of negative energy, negative reports coming out of Liberia to kind of deter from what I was just mentioning just now earlier about what's going on with the uranium and the iron ore and all of these things there. So people, when you look at the regular mainstream news that come out of Liberia, it's not going to be enticing to a Pan-African or person who's looking to say, oh man, Liberian about nothing. But I'm here to let you know for RBG Reloaded that there is a movement, and if you connect with me through on Instagram at Putu Music, you look us up on the YouTube, I'm on Facebook, that there's a movement, and the Liberia Heals Cash App that is there. It's a way for those of you all who want to help and aid the movement, because through the Liberia Heals Cash App, what that does is it assists the people who are on the ground who need help to transport, to go from place to place, from community to community. It helps with food, because nobody's going to listen when they're hungry. It helps with it helps with data. You have to pay for your data. It helps with generator to buy fuel. It helps with medical supplies, because the climate right now in Liberia, because of all the problems and all the stress externally and also internally, you hear stories about the rapings of the young kids. It's terrible. And people leave, by government leaders, prominent people, and they're going around with impunity. Is very hurtful. It's terrible. So the pressure of what's going on the weight on the people is as such that if we not if we don't pay attention to what's going on in Liberia, you know, in the context of the possibility of what I shared of a Pan-African capital, and if we let Liberia spiral out of control, it's going to set the Pan-African movement way back, because the case of Liberia is the closest thing we have to, you know, to gaining ground. So the Liberia Hues movement is geared towards maintaining stability on a grassroots level, reaching out to those who are the most vulnerable in the society and most susceptible to be used by foreign people or people who want to see trouble to, you know, to go out and start trouble in the guise of a revolution that is homegrown from the people. Okay, so the movement here is multifaceted. And if you know, initiatives like the PAFM, like the Pan-African Federalist Movement, which is a movement that is geared towards the federalizing of the continent within the next 10 years, in conjunction with supporting the diaspora, if those things are going to be manifested, then we need to have a base. You know, we need to start somewhere, and we can turn Liberia into that. And the Liberia Hues movement is set up in a way where we have a lot of youths and a lot of people who are really versed with conflict resolution skills, and we empower some of the former child soldiers, you know, fighting wars as kids, to become peace ambassadors. So we help get them get their dignity back, whereas the society sometimes tends to look down on them. And, you know, when they get involved in crime and, you know, certain things for survival, the police, you know, treats them terrible, you know, and there's no really strong rehabilitation and reintegration. Liberia Hues, although grassroots, and although it hasn't always had the most support, you know, because I'm pretty much the most, the main supporter over here. I get help, you know, here and there through people who, out of the kindness of their hearts, from what they see us on the videos that I've displayed on social media, they help from time to time. But a lot of the time when there's no donations and contributions, it's just few, you know, the little that I can help to maintain it. But with the help and people who are watching, and you know, we can really strengthen this, and I can actually bring some of these guys on a platform like this. We can help them get phones, help them to get projector screens, and do what they need to do so we can have a great, strong conversation. So lastly, I would say that to those of you who are trying to find out what is going on in Liberia, and you see what's going on in you read some of the media reports, you have to see who is that media, who is that media platform, what are their interests, what is the message behind why they're putting out there, and know that it may not be always the truth of what matter. And I'm here to help to be like a filter, to filter through all of that, and to help us stay focused on what we need to focus on as Pan-African, you know, nationalists in this time and things like that. So the Liberia Hues Cash App, $LIBHEALS is there. For those people in the States who contribute at least $50, you can get a flag for as a thank you, you know, for supporting the cause, you know. And I also have a gift there that's also called the Liberian True Centennial Stimulus Package. It's a link that I've given you all that it should be in the caption there. And that stimulus package, what that is I've condensed a lot of videos in a few literature that kind of elaborates on all that we've been talking about. One book in particular called 200 Years of Resistance is a PDF 300 book. It's in that stimulus package that is in the caption there. And by reading that book, it really gives you a clearer understanding of what we're dealing with Liberia, and how Liberia has pretty much been the foot for the U.S. military in Africa, and also the middle ground between, you know, the West and the East, you know, and how Liberia has been manipulated. So we haven't yet truly seen a very a Liberia that is free from external forces and things like that. So I say to the people that don't be dismayed and don't be discouraged by what you see of Liberia in modern day when it comes to all the political mess, but know that there is an undercurrent, a grassroots movement consciousness that needs your support and input, for us to achieve the movement, the dream of Garvey and the UNIA 100 years ago.
Your explanation just now brings a lot into focus, yeah, in terms of the issues that we have to deal with and address as Pan-Africanists, as Garveyites in this day and age. And I'm highlighting this issue of conflict resolution and dealing with the trauma of child soldiers, yeah, who are now becoming peace ambassadors, coming out of a civil war scenario. And oftentimes we can talk about neocolonialism and the what's it called, the military industrial complex, yeah, and all of these things, but these broader issues have very real consequences, yeah, on the ground for people at the grassroots, yeah, like you said, child soldiers and conflict resolution. And if unless we're addressing those issues, we're never going to achieve our broader goals, yeah, of a free and redeemed and a liberated Africa. And so I'm bringing that into focus because that scenario applies to so much more than just Liberia. Part of my family comes from Jamaica, and the 70s and 80s was basically 2 decades of rampant political violence, yeah, that as a nation, the nation hasn't yet healed from. And so the crime rate, yeah, is still very, very high, yeah. The violent crime rate is still very, very high, even though the demarcations and the lines of the conflict may not even be as definitive as they were 30 years ago. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I'm saying that to say that when we got brothers and sisters on the ground doing this work, they're dealing with a whole heap of different complicated dynamics, yeah, that feed into the broader geopolitical and economic situation of our people. And so once again, the Cash App for Liberia Heals, yeah, I'm going to post that once again. So you $LIB HEALS, yeah, support the work, and no doubt we'll be profiling that more, because so many of our nations are 20, 30 years out of a civil war, simple as you take it. Yeah. And sometimes you got civil wars that are not called civil wars. Like I said, you got political violence in Jamaica. Nobody calls it a civil war. But for 20 years, thousands of people have died, yeah, in the names of political parties. And so we just have to be aware of that, yeah, as freedom fighters and the work that we have to do, Sorry, bro.
I was going to say, in the States, the violence that goes on in the inner cities and in the communities, impoverished communities, is real trauma. You know what I mean? So I know you've been in and out. I know you wanted to chime in and everything, but yeah, definitely.
Yes, sir.
Like, support the cause.
After Chief, many people may not be aware that Liberia is also hosting a year of return. So we're going to get into that in relation to what Brother Putu calls a true centennial. And so but let's let Chief for the chime in, then we're going to get into that. And then I do believe we're gonna invite people if they want to come on and ask questions and make contributions. Is that correct? Just clarify it. Yeah. Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, man. This Wi-Fi, this Wi-Fi situation is slowing me up with hearing you. So forgive me for. I guess what I really want to say, man, to add to the conversation, definitely, man, is that Putu, man, you really came here, you really showed out. I appreciate, having your vibe. We need to have it more often. It's been since I met you, just online, man, because we do the same thing. You know what I'm saying? I do music to promote RBG. We're grassroots activists, regular, ordinary, working class brothers, man, just trying to make a difference. We know how to do. You know what I'm saying? So I've always maximum with you for that, man. But this is a whole nother level of it, man. Being able to sit down and now explain recreate that narrative so our people truly understand what's going on. And I just want to contribute to the current situation in Liberia, but um, in the last year, since we're talking about civil wars and coups, we've seen Burkina Faso, we've seen Mali, we see Guinea, Ivory Coast got struggles, Benin got struggles, Togo got serious struggles, Cameroon got serious struggles,
Gabon.
Guinea-Bissau and had an attempted coup. So what you're seeing is that there's military movements being made in this particular region. And I would say that the only states that have been spared the obvious are the Anglophone countries. Even in Mali, where you see that the people have over and they've changed their language back to Bambara. You understand? They're actually trying to make statements and let you know that this is an Africa kind of initiative. But when you're not here on the ground, you're not able to get to those forces that are involved. The enemy can paint the narrative any kind of way you wanted to paint it. So I pay attention to what's happening region right around Liberia, right around Sierra Leone, right now, and know that it's impossible for those things that happen and them not have impacts here. In our civil wars in these countries, you had people who fled Ivory Coast. You had people who invaded from Ivory Coast. You had people who fled to Sierra Leone. You had people who attempted to invade from Sierra Leone. You had people from Guinea in the Sierra Leone. You had a time when the Sierra Leoneans went cross border and attacked Conakry. And so people who understand the warpath that our imperialist enemies are on, they would truly understand that this RBG Reloaded movement, this Blacktricity sensation, this Garveyism at this moment, man, this might be our last stand, man. You know what I'm saying? This might be it. And so, don't look at it like, oh, these guys are doing hip hop. Nah, we making sure that we deliver the message in every single way possible. You understand? And people, just like if you like hardcore, like gangster, you're not going to listen to gangster rap from somebody who's not a gangster. If you want to listen to RBG music, listen to the RBG cats. Listen to the brothers who's doing the actual work, who's actually traveling and actually suffering at the same time to serve the people. So Garveyism is alive. The imperialists are alive. Our resistance to imperialism is alive. And our people don't understand it like that. And that's why we got to get back on our political education here on the continent. The people here truly need to understand the assignment of the times. Because like I said, this might be it. This might be it. So a little bit more I want to say. Sierra Leone, my organization will be organizing a two country tour. We'll be bringing people to Freetown for 7 days and taking them to Monrovia for 7 days. I know I'm looking forward to make sure that the brothers and sisters down there and are able to get to our people as they travel. You guys out there don't know it, but a lot of times when you come here, if you go with the native tourism or even native families and friends, they don't necessarily always have access to the same connections that people from the diaspora have here. There's a great imbalance and things like that. So tourism is growing. Why? Because slapped a jab mandate. You're mandated now in Ghana. People were going there, but now them same people are saying, "Yo, what's Sierra Leone looking like? What's Liberia looking like?" Why? Because when you look around the region, all you see is warfare, except for here. But we are the ones that have the stigma of always being at war. This is later, man, after those conflicts, and our people, just like Brother Putu was saying, are out here organizing and appealing to the Pan-African world to take our cries very serious. We have men, women, and children to defend, to feed, to represent, just like everybody else in the world. So we would like to make sure that the Pan-African world never, ever oversteps Liberia in particular. Liberia is still everything that it's always been. The people are there, the land is there, the food is beautiful, the beauty is there. liberate Liberia. Yet liberated. None of these countries are yet liberated. And this process now is completely out of our control because whereas some of us would like to just grab guns and get busy, this warfare is a lot more common than that. And we have to address the issue of psychological warfare. We have to reset the minds of our people towards the African objective. And so I just salute you, bro. Definitely salute the work out there. Shout out to King George, the whole movement out there in Liberia. The tour will be coming to Sierra Leone. I believe it's April 20th, like April 28th. Then we'll be jumping over to Liberia for 7 days. Those who don't know, March 11th makes 230-year commemoration since the founding of Freetown by Africans from the diaspora. And this year represents the 200 years of Liberia. A lot of people think that we just coming back, that we just getting back. No, 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 no. We've been coming back. We've been exchanging. We've been interacting. And I would say, as a brother who left Babylon on purpose with no reason to ever go back, middle finger to Babylon, I can say that the revolution is alive and it's in the hearts and the minds of our people at home and abroad. And, you know, Fort March is a part of that. We're ready to bring this content to our people to make sure that they got it. Very serious conversations. Tourism in the context of these year of returns is very, 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 very important. You have to watch the diplomatic officials who on these tours. You have to do diplomatic officials who they are, States of America, and who their buddies are before they reach Liberia, before they reach Sierra Leone for these commemorations. We, the Pan-Africans, have to let the know who these people are, if they are not Pan-Africans or if they are Pan-Africans. Because I'm seeing a media play happen right now. And Liberia, you know, return. I see certain celebrities being selected to draw attention, like cheap marketing almost. And that's what it looks like on the surface. But behind that, you have very high-powered members of the Black Congressional Congress. You have very high members of Black Congress people. You have very high members of the United States military that are black, like us. And they are doing the of U.S. imperialism. They are softening in us for the next blow. And it all like financial capital. It looks like they're coming to help. And it's not that. Now is the time for us to push these NGOs, these government volunteer organizations that have been spying on our movement for the last 50, 60 years. It's time to push them out and reclaim that political space for the movement. And so Pan-Africanism is alive, but it's time for us to thrive. It's time for us to really remobilize, re-educate ourselves, recontextualize our narrative, and advance. That's why we say Fort March.
Yes. That's powers. That's powers. Let's get into this then, because obviously it's a bicentennial, that is being forwarded at the moment. There's a program, there's an agenda. So Putu, like, give us a reflection of how you think the government is really laying out, and rolling out the program for this bicentennial. What's the significance of it, if any, to us as Pan-Africanists? How should we be profiling and engaging in these celebrations, observances, and so on and so forth? And I believe Chief Fuller just kind of gave us some windows into the answer, but give us an underground in Liberia reflection.
Yes, indeed, man. Very powerful words, Chief Foday. So, as it's been said, the year 1820 or 2022 is the bicentennial of not the nation state Liberia, but the 200-year anniversary of the original settlement of Monrovia. You know, that the original settlement that later on became Liberia as a nation state. So from 1822 to 2022, like even that right there is very important, you know, in terms of understanding and clarity, because in the dissemination of the information, not even just to the outside world, but to the Liberian people, some of the 200-year bicentennial rhetoric kind of caused some confusion to some Liberians who, for all this time, they've been celebrating, you know, they know 1847 as independence, and that's 173 or 70. I forgot how many years it is now. But so what is the bicentennial? What are we doing? So and that's one of the problems when it comes to the communication gaps. You know, even our brother Chief Foray right now is challenged right now with the communications, you know, the technology. And we have to also say that a lot of these communication companies are foreign owned and too. So it's very intentional for the technology, you know, between Liberia and Sierra Leone to be kept at a certain level, because it creates problems in disseminating the information. So the government has had a very hard time. The Liberian government has had a hard time disseminating the true information. But not only that, they seem to be getting scripts, you know, and ushered into how, you know, telling the narrative of the bicentennial. And it's a narrative that it is kind of like a romantic relationship between the nation of Liberia and the U.S. government. And, you know, these conversations that we are having right here, that we've had today, you know, the bicentennial events, it really, I won't even say scratch the surface. They might put a little here and there, because you can't say, you know what I mean, obviously talk about slavery and other things, but they don't get into the meat of it. And what has happened now is that this bicentennial events have actually served as almost like a distraction from some of the things that are happening, the agreements that are happening, the conversations that we need to have about, you know, some of these concession agreements, as I mentioned earlier. Also, with the political climate, and it's an election next year, okay? And Liberia had its first transfer of power from one regime to a new regime, from the Ellen Johnson administration to the George Weah, successful democratic transfer of power in decades. And it was very significant. But why this conversation here is so important, okay, and with the context that Chief has also talked about what's going on in some of the surrounding countries, is that when a coup happens, or when a nation is in a trusteeship, or you have to have the intervention of the UN or peace troops and things of that nature, one of the things that happens is the suspension of the Constitution. Okay, so when you have the suspension of the Constitution in Liberia, which has some provisions in there that serves as a safety or protectorate mechanism for the resources in the land, when you have like a destabilization, it creates the avenue for foreign investors to go rampant, to run rampant. And when you really do your research and you see what was going on in Liberia and Sierra Leone during the crisis in the 80s and the 90s, there was a lot of resources that was extracted out of Liberia during those time periods. Okay, so what's happening in Ukraine is an example. Okay, so if there's a destabilization and everything, you know, there's a lot of resources that are being taken out at that time. But remember, Liberia, you know, everybody's looking at Ukraine, but what about, you know, Africa? What about Liberia, right? So if Liberia were to be in a state of turmoil, but it was blamed on the political situation, the homegrown political situation, right? And then the people cry out for international community to come and, you know, help. Okay, all right, so the UN comes in there, but then what about these big old tanks and all these things that are going on into the interior, into the rural areas, and extracting all type of, well, what are in those trucks, you know? And a lot of the life a lot of the life in Liberia is like after a certain time, a lot of people are not out like that. You know what I mean? But you see a lot of trucks, a lot of things, movement happen overnight. You know what I'm saying? And these are the things we have to pay attention to. So in the Liberian situation, the bicentennial, if left just for the Liberian government to be controlled, we got to remember that they're controlled by others. You know what I'm saying? And we'll kind of be done with the bicentennial conversation within a few weeks, and it's on to the latest scandal. Every day, every week, there's a new scandal that emerges, and the people are like, oh, it's corruption, it's this. But we need to put a microscope on corruption. The corruption is okay, it's described, people say that, oh, the politicians in the country, the government officials, they're just stealing money. But we have to ask the question, number one, who is giving this money to the government, okay, and to these officials? And if they are giving this money, do they not know that the corruption is occurring? You know, do they not know that it's happening, but they continue to keep on giving money? You know, is there not in their best interest for an environment of corruption to continue so that it causes a distrust of the people against the government and makes it difficult for Liberian diaspora to come in to intervene in the private sector? Okay, is it not in the best interest for the colonial, the imperialists to keep that system of corruption going? So the critique of corruption is what I'm saying when Liberians often talk, and not just Liberia, but all the African nations, and we always talk about corruption, corrupt African officials. But the corruption that goes on in African governments is only an extension of a global corrupt system. And when you have leaders who want to change the dynamics of that corrupt, situation within their country, they're met with resistance a lot. They're made to look like an enemy to their own people. And it's not here to say that these leaders are always perfect, but that's what happens. The imperialists will use the problems or issues or the bad traits of that leader who may be trying in their own way to change the landscape of corruption. And they will develop a whole movement and revolution to go against them, and then install a leader or government or regime that is more compliant with that system of corruption. Okay, so it's very, very important in the days and the weeks and the months between the next election and now, between now and the next Liberian election, to maintain peace, in Liberia, Sierra Leone, because as Chief Fode just said, this might be the last, not might, but this is the last bastion of hope. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. So this is a call to all those listening and watching as Pan-Africans, to pay attention to Liberia and Sierra Leone in this time. Not to say that Liberia and Sierra Leone are better than any other African nations, not to say that, but to say that in there, Liberia and Sierra Leone, lies the opportunity for us to reassert our power as Pan-Africanists globally. Okay, and if we can rally our support and pay attention strategically, not neglecting our other comrades around the world, but paying attention, okay, within a very short amount of time, we can gain ground and gain major strides in the Pan-African movement.
Yes, family. You know what I'm saying? Bro, I could talk to you for hours. Like there's so much to do and to build upon, and I look forward to doing more works and building more links with you. So we're gonna all right. We're closing. We're gonna come to the close of our show today, Kings and Queens. Yeah. And so you know what I mean. We've done a couple hours. It's a couple hours good. Make sure you share the links then far and wide. Yeah. Make sure you share the links then far and wide. Oh, by the way, I don't want to neglect the chat. So we'll take some comments from the chat because there's a few, and then we're gonna close. I read that one already. Coffee Campbell says, re Tony Martin, stop apologizing for the King government. I don't know who did that, but yeah. He also says the King government was corrupt, spending money like drunken sailors, and got a loan from America to spend more money. Politics is poison. So yeah, I don't know. Nobody was apologizing for King. King was a corrupt individual, but he was corrupt in as much as he was a satellite of the Liberian government at the time was a satellite of the American government. So it sounds like there's some protection of Firestone and the American government there. But go ahead, Puto. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Okay, to the person who keeps on saying that who wanted to acknowledge King's Charles D.B. King, the president at that time. All right, let's say, okay, yeah, okay, what now? Okay, what is the point of emphasizing that? Okay, and the thing that we often get caught up in, not just this situation, is that we always only want to implicate ourselves, our own, when we look at throughout history, there's so many cases of people who worked against their own, against the greater cause. And we're not here to say, that we writing them off the hook or anything like that.
No,
okay.
No,
but we're saying that we have to put this within the context, the greater context, and emphasize that. And to that, and as we do that, we can set an example to modern day people, modern day administration, modern day leaders to not do the same thing that was done in the past. Okay, exactly. So trying to overshadow what we are doing here by creating a larger context as to what's happening. Okay, I don't know if that's intentional. I will hope it's not intentional, because then we know who you are and we know what you're doing. But if you're just simply trying to emphasize and acknowledge, okay, yeah, King, played a role or whatever, boom. We didn't say that he didn't. And we said that there was a reason why it happened, know?
Yeah. Of course. I'm actually gonna do what the brother said. Sorry, Chief, but the brother did say to read Tony Martin, yeah. And it's a book I've read many, many times, all right? So we're going to go to race first, all right? Because we don't read this book many, many times. So we know what it says already, all right? So we're going just read a section that deals with this history. And he says, the 99-year lease by Liberia of 1 million acres, to the Firestone Rubber Company of Akron, Ohio, added yet another possible explanation for the repudiation of Garvey's scheme. President King, with encouragement from Dubois, was making up his mind to grant Firestone the land about the same time as he was rudely thwarting Garvey's aspirations. Dubois' role in the rubber deal seems to have been fairly intimate. In 1924, he had accompanied the United States minister Solomon Porter Hood and a Firestone rubber expert on a trip to Liberia's rubber lands to ascertain whether Firestone should invest in the area. In 1925, he sought to capitalize on all of this by asking Harvey Firestone to include blacks among the company's supervisory personnel in Liberia. Listen carefully now. All he got was a meaningless reply from the company promising nothing. Yeah. Right. 1 second. I'm nearly there. Yeah. Meanwhile, the 1924 UNIA convention warned that a Firestone concession would ultimately mean, quote, the usurpation of the government, even as has been done with the Black Republic of Liberia after white companies entered there under the pretense of developing the country. This warning may have contributed to the Liberian hostility when Firestone offered a $5 million loan in exchange, $5 million loan in exchange for the right to appoint 22 officials to run Liberia's financial, military, and native affairs. Yeah, so that's what the Garveyites at the time, the convention at the time was saying about Firestone in Liberia and the extent to which neocolonialism was at play in relation to it. All right. So there's no doubt about what was going on there. There is another comment here, which we're not going to get, we don't have time to go into because we're wrapping up. But Coffee also says, as long as power is centralized in political arena, Garveyism cannot flourish, because he says Garveyism is capitalism. And I know myself and Chief Wade can go on about that for a very long time. But another day we're going to explore whether Garveyism is capitalism or not. Yeah, that's a funny statement still. But my brother Putu, thank you very much for joining us. And sharing what you have shared today. I'm sure it has been insightful for many brothers and sisters who have listened in. And yeah, man, Chief, are there any closing words from yourself? I think Chief hit the wrong button there. You got a screen, Chief. We can't see you. There we go.
Yeah, greetings. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh man, I'm having crazy problems, man, going in and out, man. I don't know if you could repeat a little bit of what you said first.
So that's that
Wi-Fi,
again,
man. It's terrible in that.
Oh, you can't hear what I'm saying. No, I was saying, did you have any closing words before we lock off?
The video.
Oh, you want to play the video? Yes, I did have it loaded up before, but Putu was in his flow, you know. I didn't want to interrupt him, you know what I mean? So yeah, I literally had it lined up, you know. So let me get the video in, so we can hear the RBG reloaded. Oh wait, hold on, I got the wrong.
All right, I'm gonna try the video now.
Nah, yeah, we drop the video and then we'll get to your closing words, bro. Yeah, we'll get to your closing words.
About the video, man.
Yeah, man. Let's get the video in.
All right. RBG reloaded.
United.
It's your boy Putu.
Develop an undying love for our people. Our people. Our people.
RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 loaded, loaded, loaded. RBG resurrected and they shall respect it. We most high protected, spiritually well connected. Give it up for our ancestors one time. Pan-Africanism running through my bloodline. They thought it was a joke on some Steve Harvey shit. Fucked around and got it popping on some Garvey shit. 100 years in the game, they say it's a shame. We taking the mantle, handle business ain't no thing. Time to clean up the mess, it's a landfill. Corona flow make the whole world stand still. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 loaded, 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 loaded. LIB plus RBG, we know our true identity. Black America, they try to take Liberia out of your history. Shout out to the indigenous in the hinterland, interior, with a culture and dollars. But let me can't do loquwa. Hey, belly of the beast, go for we come in talking. La bella truth, Jolopo, your royal stomach. Y'all think like joking business. Babylon, listen. Hell fire on your spirit. Ella, why you trembling? This for the gangsters, man. This for the Zogo stand. This for the street children hustling with no hope, man. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. They try to stop the prophecy, they should acknowledge we need everything stolen from us, plus an apology. Talking reparations and restitutions, but we need to heal from the damage of these institutions. Let's put emotions to the side, this is logic here. RBG still alive, hear me loud and clear. All enemies of progress, dropping fear. Now what a sight to the third eye, stop and stare. Work to the wise, this is season of judgment. In other words, make way for the most high government. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 loaded, 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 loaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, 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 reloaded. RBG reloaded, reloaded.
Yes, family, RBG reloaded. We're reloading right about now, Kings and Queens, and it soon pop off. You know what I mean? It soon bust off. Round, yeah. Give thanks, brother Putu, for the energy. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, that's the movement, Kings and Queens. We're reloading this RBG movement. So yeah, man, we're gonna get into some closing vibrations. Anybody can go first. You want to close off first?
I want to, again, give thanks to the Most High for orchestrating this. Thanks to you guys for March. Shakara Speaks, Chief Day, the Basani, the whole movement, the whole Exodus, Alliance, and everybody who's watching. Thank those who are watching right now live. Thank the brother, the folks who've been contributing, even those who who give our insight to. Everybody's watching now and who's going to continue watching it. I just want to give thanks and put the word out there for those who want to get in touch again. Get in touch with me on Instagram at Putu Music, Putu Music, as well as I'm on Facebook. Type in PUTUGAH, Putuga, Takwa Phenom. You can get in touch with me there. And please, 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 if you appreciate the knowledge and the information that was shared in this, and know and understand the urgency, that Liberia Heals initiative is very important. We have the Cash App that's there. Every little $10, $20, every little bit helps, and you get to see the work as you go. Whenever people contribute their contributions, we have a video from people live on the ground calling your name. You're having kids eating, women, youths eating and benefiting from the little that you're able to help with. It don't take a whole lot sometimes. People think, oh, I don't have the money, but $5 here. If everybody who's, gives $5, if like 20 people give $5, that's $100, and that can go a long way. So please make use of that Cash App, the LIB Hughes. Shout out to Joe's Ever Living King live and direct out there, who's doing a whole lot of work. We hope to get him on the program at some point. Adonis, Chokon, our first peace ambassador. Shout out to him. I just sent a picture to Brother Fode. His son got roughed up by the cops out there in the situation. And those are some of the things that we deal with, the challenges. So when you help out with that, we can help give medical care to the people who need it. Shout out to everybody watching, and shout out to the Liberian people. My people, y'all, are doing what I can do to put the information there to the people, the Pan-African, the people who we need to be talking to now, so that we can fix this thing, so we can fix Liberia the way it needs to be. I hope y'all understand it. So y'all follow the movement, my Liberian people. Let's connect with the RBG now and save that country. It's all about Liberian sovereignty, see? Liberian sovereignty 2022. That's what we're pushing for. Y'all get that stimulus package. The link is there too. That Liberian stimulus package is a lot. That's the first one. It's a gift to you guys. Get in touch. You can't get in touch with me. Get in touch with these guys. They'll connect us. That's it for right now, man. Shout out to the PAFM too. Shout out to the PAFM and all the UNIA and all the Pan-African organizations out there doing their thing. Shout out to Sam, Baba Sangor, Mama Noben, to everybody doing their thing. Shout out to the artists too.
Yes,
worldwide.
Yes, sir.
The link for the stimulus package is also in the chat, kings and queens. So you can click that link and access the download. All right, Chief Funny, go ahead.
So, definitely, man. Appreciate Putu, man. You know, appreciate you too, brother Sakurai, man. We definitely set it off today. Set the standard for Fort March. Expect nothing less than that. Hopefully, we try and get to a weekly edition, man. It's about time. You know, we brothers making. We got to make the time for the people to be enthused. You know what I'm saying? So, my man Putu, man, yo, it feels real good finally being able to get you on the platform. Public presentation of so much vast knowledge, so much real passion for Garveyism, man. I love you, brother. Give you your flowers and your love while we, and just know that it's about how we can maneuver things. The Black Star Action not 10 people's organization. It belongs to the African race. And so we commit this organization to Garvey. And also, we strongly support and advocate, and that's for all true Garveyites and Pan-Africanists out there to learn more about how they can get involved. You support and consider joining the UNIACL. I'm a part of the Rehabilitating Committee 2020, formed a few years ago, but we're all doing the same exact work as long as we're genuine Garveyites. See us all come together in a more neutral place and be together into some practicality. You understand? Definitely again, salute, man. Shaka. Listen, my Wi-Fi was going in, so I appreciate y'all.
Yes, family, Chief Funny, brother Putu, myself, Shakara. It's a powerful one, kings and queens. We got it started today, and yeah, man, like I really want to be able to profile and shine a light on the Pan-African movement globally through this show. And so we started that today by going to Liberia with our brother, and just stay tuned in. If you're not subscribed to Forward March, subscribe to Forward March right here now. Yeah, don't leave the video before you subscribe to the thing. Yeah. In fact, as I go in my local patois, yeah, Mr. Untouchable said that what he said, what's it called? He said, crazy how Liberian sounds so Caribbean. You know, there's a story there where you talk about the pigeon of West Africa, and Sierra Leone and Liberia in particular. There's a story, there's a history, there's a reason for that. Yeah, even connecting that to the Gullah Geechee. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? There's a story there. Yeah. So one day we might go into that history there a little more. You know what I mean? Because I listened to Fela Kuti growing up, and I understood Fela Kuti because I speak Patois. You know what I mean? So that's just how it goes. Our languages are so very connected. So we give thanks for that. But I am thankful for both my brothers and looking forward to doing more work through this platform. You know what I'm saying? So we close with the words of the most eminent prophet, Marcus Messiah Garvey, and just say, race first, one God, one aim, one destiny. Rise, you mighty African people, for you can accomplish whatever you will.